Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to prune your tomato plants to make the plants more manageable and to improve your yields. So the first thing you need to be able to do is identify the different parts of the plant. So you have your main stalk, the main stem of the plant going up. Then you have a few different types of branches coming off of it. You have your leaf branches, which are, you can tell they only have leaves on them and they lay in a flat manner. If you look at it this way, it looks as if all the little leaflets are coming off kind of flat like this. Then you have a sucker. A sucker is going to be in the little armpit, if you will, between the main branch of the plant and your leaf branch. They look a little bit different. They kind of have a very obvious divide between the stem of the plant and the stem of the sucker. And also you can tell a difference because instead of just having all these flat leaflets like coming off of it like this, it's going to have other compound leaves coming off of it, and it's going to look like a miniature version of the main stalk of the plant. The other thing you have is fruiting branches, flowering fruiting branches, which obviously, as the name suggests, will have flowers and or fruit on them. So once you know what you're looking at, it's time to start pruning. Ordinarily I would use garden shears, I just couldn't find mine today, so I'm using regular scissors. Also, sometimes when the plants are small enough you can just pinch them off, but when they're bigger it's better to use an actual cutting utensil. So the first thing you want to prune is any leaf branches or anything, any branches really, that are low enough that they are touching the ground. Getting rid of these is going to help you, it's going to help prevent disease, because any of those branches that are touching the ground are going to be more prone to picking up diseases, molds, mildews, blight, stuff like that that can be in the ground. So any of these ones that are low enough to be touching the ground, I'm going to go ahead and snip off. Sometimes you don't have to snip off the whole thing like this if I wanted to. Instead of cutting off the whole thing, I could just cut off the end so it's not touching the ground. The next thing you want to trim off is suckers. Remember, we said the sucker is the kind of miniature plant that's growing between the main stem of the plant and the leaf branch. So this little thing right here, that's a sucker. Again, it's small enough that I can just pinch it right off. But sometimes as they get bigger, like this here, this is also a sucker. That's the leaf branch, and there's the main stem, and that's between it, so that's a sucker. And it's a fair amount bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and use the scissors, snip it off, and that leaf branch also because it's touching the ground. Okay. The one exception to the cutting all the suckers off rule, I'm also going to cut off this one. Sometimes, and not all plants have this, but sometimes plants will have a sucker that's different from the rest. This one does have one. So I'm going to show you. So this right here, this sucker is actually not right next to a leaf branch, and it looks a little bit different than the others. So the others, there was a very clear divide between the plant and the sucker, and this one, it's kind of just looks like a split in a tree, more so. So that sucker, it's not as much of an angle, and it's going to be a lot stronger. And in some cases, it's even hard to tell which one is the main stalk and which one is the sucker. In this case, I can tell that it was this one, but I'm still going to leave it. You don't have to, but you can leave that, and it'll basically grow into two main stalks. So in this case, I am going to leave it, and I'm going to weave both of those into my trellis. The other thing that you can prune sometimes, you usually won't. I'm not going to on this plant. But in some cases, especially if you're buying plants from a nursery and they've been around for a while, This is more when you're just planting the plants. Sometimes they'll already have a flowering or fruiting branch on them. Usually you're gonna leave those alone, of course, because you want the fruit that's gonna grow on it. But when you first plant a plant, if it already has flowers on it, sometimes it can be a good idea to pinch those off, because that's going to allow the plant to focus on building its root system and getting established before it puts all that energy into growing fruit. The other thing you want to avoid cutting off almost always is the top of your plant. So this is your main stem, and this is the top of the plant, and it's going to keep growing up. This one, sometimes you'll do accidentally, especially if you're doing it like I'm doing, where we're weaving them in and out of the trellis. Sometimes when you're kind of bending the plant around, you can accidentally break those off. What's going to happen then is that's just going to stop your plant growth right there. It's not going to get any taller. It's not going to be putting out any more fruiting branches up along the main stem of the plant. The exception to that is, so usually we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to avoid cutting that off. The exception to that is sometimes plants get really tall over the course of the season. They're going to get all the way to the top of this trellis potentially. In fact, I've got one over here. This one might actually be a problem with this plant because it's going to be July, and it's already almost to the top of my trellis. So once it gets beyond where it has support, it can go for a little bit, but then it's gonna, if it keeps growing, it's gonna be flopping around. In that case, I might be better off to just cut that plant off so it'll stop growing taller, and it'll just focus on putting out all its energy into the fruiting branches that it already has established along the plant. So that's kind of the one exception to cutting that off, but for the most part, what we're focusing on is just those lower leaf branches and the suckers. So anyway, hope that helps. Thanks for watching.